Hello. So I wanted to make a video discussing why the biblical worldview presents a solution to evil, like an ultimate solution for evil. So some of what I'm about to say is obvious. Some of what I'm about to say may be totally new to some people. Some people may know some things, some people may not. But I'm going to start from square one and kind of build the case for uh, how the story of the Bible and the work of Jesus and all that can save the world. So in the beginning, I made another video about creation and what's going on there in terms of like physically how to reconcile the reality that natural selection is a natural phenomenon that happened, the fact that you can break down species into their constituent parts and have it build over time all the way, and the idea of there being a creator God. Basically, the big idea that I had there was there are three primary theories as to why life proliferates and increases in goodness and sophistication and all that. There is an outside creator created life. There is natural selection, chaos, essentially just random chance is what brought about life. Namely, in the primordial fluids, there were heat vents, and the heat from those heat vents provided a chemical environment that allowed certain elements, certain molecules to start replicating. And once you have replication, we're off to the races. And then there is the idea of implicit necessity, which, as I understand it, is basically life by definition does that. It proliferates, it evolves. It just, like, life has to do that by its definition. And maybe that could be said stronger, but so in Genesis, what we have is all three at the same time. We have the creator God, insto presto, here's everything. We have him doing that by drawing order out of chaos, and chaos is natural selection. It's the raw materials of a meaningless universe. And then he does that by speaking a word, and that spoken word is itself the implicit necessity that imbues all things with life and spirit and everything. So anyway, there's that. So anyway, the metaphorical story continues. Humanity. So Adam, the name Adam means humankind, human. Many churches will say it's a literal single man. I would say a fair way to consider it is humanity. And then Eve is created out of the rib of Adam, which visually, so in creation, God separates light from darkness, separates waters from waters, separates the waters beneath from the waters beneath, allowing dry ground to appear. Similarly, God separates man from himself, splitting him in half, so that out of the side of Adam comes Eve. And that's a metaphorical expression for the phenomenon of sexual dimorphism in evolution. Okay, so we got all that. So when God drew order out of chaos, I think chaos is where there's potential for there to be lies and evil and all that stuff. And drawing order out of chaos, the evil stuff didn't like that. And so chaos, what's left of it, has been trying to draw creation back into chaos, completely unsuccessfully, until whatever Lucifer is, coupled with one of these evil spirits, became Satan, came into an ordered universe and corrupted everything. To me, the act of reaching for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the original sin, what it actually is a choice to listen to the snake instead of to God. Right? Because God said, don't eat from this tree. And the snake said, yeah, go ahead. It's fine. And, humanity failed the test and listened to the snake. Further, the temptation to do that succeeded in persuading Adam and Eve to do it was to grab for power and status, right? The temptation was, if you eat of this fruit, you will be like God. And the bitter irony is, they were already the image of God, already ruling the earth. But they were tempted to grab its status. So ultimately, I think what we have is, somewhere along the course of human history, some human beings started to elevate themselves in status in an illicit way. They started to be spiritual leaders over other people, ruling by lies and misinformation to get people to give them money and give them whatever. So ultimately, that is the origin of evil, what's truly evil in the world. And there's so much more going on. You know, if we're created out of pure chaos and order drawn out of that, you know, we're created out of the dust of the earth, but we also have the breath of God in our nostrils, and that's, you know, how we came to be. There are other sources for corruption and confusion, but the ultimate storyline of where evil came from in human history was people doing that, lying as spiritual leaders to aggrandize themselves for glory, status, money, sex, power, all that. Okay, so that's original sin. The consequence of original sin, there were some things that God said were going to happen because of original sin. One of the things that God said would happen was the ultimate solution to the problem was going to come from the seed of the woman, right? The seed of the woman. So generations down from Eve, there was going to come a future something that was going to save the world. And God put enmity between the seed of the snake and the seed of the woman. Right? So the good guys versus bad guys tension runs through the Old Testament in many, many ways. Fast forward to when you get to Jesus. Jesus identified who the seed of the snake was. He called the Pharisees, the spiritual leaders who were ruling by lies and misrepresenting God, he called them a brood of vipers, or a generation of serpents, or the seed of the snake. So what Jesus is saying when he calls them a brood of vipers, he is identifying the Pharisees not only as hypocrites, but the actual enemy of humanity. The enemy. They're the bad guys. The spiritual leaders who lie. So basically, the original sin of humanity was to listen to those leaders instead of listening to truth and love and conscience. Now, the truth that should be there instead of the lie that, we should listen to the snake instead of that lie, the truth is we don't have status like that over each other. When I see you, I see myself. When I see anyone of any race, gender, creed, religion, nationality, sexual orientation, anything, any category, when I see someone else, I should see a person that is equally declared dignified by the mouth of God. All of us are created in the image of God. Full stop. There are no caveats to that. Okay? So when I elevate myself, I am so corrupting the natural order that I'm destroying all of creation. Fast forward to our day and age, we have churches that are full of greed and wickedness and corruption. We have modern day Pharisees. And they are the reason that this is taking so long. Because they've stolen our book. They've stolen our book. And they use it to do the exact express opposite of what God wanted it to do. Right? And they do this because they're in the business of being spiritual leaders. They want to get tithes. They want to get status. But ultimately, they made that original sin. They said, I am in office and in status superior to other people. My word to them should supersede their own conscience. And that leads to every kind of perversion you can imagine. And that's why we have this dichotomy of people, the Bible says love your enemies and treat people well and be a good, decent person. But then the church itself does every evil thing you can imagine. So that people look at the church and think that Christians are the bad guys. Because in many cases they are. You can take on that name and still be a Pharisee. Right? So, what do we do? What do we do? Jesus, one of his most famous rebukes of Pharisees, he wasn't speaking to any one church. He wasn't speaking to any one group of people necessarily. It says in the introduction of the diatribe that he goes on that he was speaking to the multitude. So anyone could be a Pharisee, right? I could be a Pharisee, right? What's the difference? What is the difference? I would contend that as long as I identify that I am not imbued with spiritual authority that is different than anybody else's, as long as I say I am the image of God exactly like you are, and I don't have access to God in a way that you don't. Anything that I know, I heard. And anything I heard came from a source. And that source is equally common to everyone. But anyone can be a Pharisee. Anyone can make that mistake. Anyone can start getting puffed up, proud, full of themselves, and start... I've been guilty of that. Thinking I'm the one who should be talking when I'm the one who should be listening. Because talking without listening is hypocrisy. Right? What do we do then in our communities when we see someone acting that way? I would say that's when you employ the method of approach that person individually, then bring 2 or 3 people, then bring the entire community, always with the goal of winning over your brother or sister, winning them over to save them and to end the madness. Just communicate with them. And yes, there is an element of confrontation if they're out of line in a major way. But I'm not proposing anything violent, right? I'm proposing that we address those people with discernment and with strength enough to solve the issue, just like you solve any dispute between people. So, if you're in a church and your pastor is acting arrogant, maybe the right thing to do is, hey, you said this in this way. Maybe there was a better way to say that. How are you doing? Are you feeling in touch with God? Are you feeling in touch with people? Are you losing touch a little bit? Because that felt very out of line. In a spirit of trying to bring them back, right? If they don't hear you, bring a friend or 2 to back you up, just so that if it gets into a confrontation, cooler heads can prevail. And then bring the congregation in, because there might be a serious problem going on. And if that person completely refuses to listen to their entire community about something, then the Bible says, what can you do? What can you do? That person shouldn't be allowed to destroy everything. So still, it's not violent. It's just maybe we don't hang out with that person. Maybe that person shouldn't be in leadership in a church. So anyway, so all of that is the process of addressing evil. But now the kind of amazing and exciting part is that if all of this is correct, that this is the source of evil in the world, all of the power structures that have emerged from people thinking they're superior to each other for any reason, any power that operates that way can be dismantled by dismantling the spiritual stuff that's going on in terms of who is misbehaving in this way. We have a method for addressing them, and we just speak the truth. We say the truth, and eventually the truth wins out. And over time, that can dismantle entire governments in terms of like we wouldn't end up with a president who says that immigrants are the enemy, because we know better. We have been spiritually taught. We have been taught by Jesus to love God and to love each other. And when I see an immigrant, when I see someone who is different than me in some way, I am still seeing myself. I'm seeing someone who is that same image of God that I am. So ultimately, then, you've won over your voter base to reason again, and crazy stuff like this can't be voted for. And proliferate that truth, go ye forth unto all the nations, telling people all these truths, all these ideas. Eventually, you purge the earth of the primary source of evil. And then Revelation, the book of Revelation, is an expression of how that actually plays out, and it gets very crazy. I will say a good book for understanding Revelation without totally losing your mind is Eyes to See the Revelation by T. Keenan Smith, I'm going to say. That book really helped me. Basically, it really helped me to see that God didn't say, okay, I'll come back, tee-hee, 2,000 years later, nothing happened. That's not what happened. Most of the historical stuff that the metaphors are referring to happened between AD 66 and AD 70, which is pretty quickly after the events of Jesus and the church thereafter beginning and proliferating. Stuff came to a head apparently quickly. And now I think where we're at, is there going to be an ultimate return of Jesus? I'm not going to pretend like I can answer that in an intelligent way, because I don't know. People believe it, and I don't blame them for believing it. Would be great if, lightning shot from one side of the sky to the other, Jesus came back and zapped everything back into the creative order that it was always intended to be. This cosmos. And but what I think is fair to say is that when you're talking about the Bible, you're talking about archetypical things, right? Like the phenomenon of Captain Ahab being a monomaniac obsessed with revenge. That archetype can pop up anywhere in the real world. It touches on something universal that just is a phenomenon that can happen. In Revelation, you have archetypes, and so you have these patterns, and maybe in a way that we don't fully grasp, some of them are playing out at different times in different places. Like life is messy and things might be scattered in a sense. But yeah, ultimately, in everything I've said here in this video, what I'm trying to tell you is that if you have gained hope from the Bible, may it be restored to you if you lost it. Right? And if this video helped you with a piece that maybe you weren't totally aware of, or maybe everything I said is completely obvious to everyone, I don't know. Basically, believing in the Bible is not an unreasonable position to me. And because of that, it's reasonable to draw hope from it. And so maybe let's start listening to each other again and start seeing our common humanity again. And we have a mechanism now for addressing evil at the root. Right? a reasonable, peaceful, truthful, nonviolent approach to save the world. You know, one conversation at a time. Listening to my female friends, I think that where we might be at in terms of if there's a primary storyline in Revelation that is also a primary storyline in all human cultures at the same time. And there is going to be, exactly as described, Jesus coming back in that way. If there is such a thing, I think where we're probably at is people, the martyrs are crying out for justice. The victims of abuse are crying out for justice. And that seems to occur between days 5 or between seals 5 and 6 in Revelation. All the martyrs are under the altar and they cry out, "How long before we're avenged?" And what happens? Right? What happens when they cry out? They're clothed in glory. The martyrs are clothed in glory. The heavens go nuts, and everyone of status, of any kind, ends up running for the hills. They end up in caves, terrified of what's going to happen next. I would challenge everyone who has suffered anything, no matter how great, for the sake of yourself and the sake of your community, the sake of God, and for the reality that you yourself, as I have done evil, terrible things. Evil, terrible things. And I have been forgiven of those things. So if someone wrongs me, in order to not be a hypocrite, I have to recognize God can save that person and forgive them. With that spirit of forgiveness, for our own healing, if nothing else, I would challenge everybody to a radical forgiveness. And it is a bitch to do. You have to dig into the muck and into the darkness of yourself that somebody else imposed on you. You have to face it, and you have to say, this will not win the day with me. This will not win the day with me. I will change this story to someone who overcame these evils and turned it into the glory of love and goodness itself. Okay. I think I've said enough. It was about half an hour long. Truly, truly, peace and love to everyone. And I hope this video helped you in some way. Okay.